Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. Very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. Delighted today to be joined by a former professional rugby player, Marcus Watson, a man who has straddled two forms of the game: international sevens with Great Britain, taking him to an Olympics and a silver medal no less, and also the 15-a-side version operating in the UK with Newcastle, spending some time with Wasps as well, and then latterly over in Italy with Benetton. So quite an eclectic career. Marcus, first and foremost, welcome, and thank you very much for sharing your time with us today.
No, not at all. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Now, obviously, as you know from the format of these shows, Marcus, we're here to talk very much about the challenges of transition and how you step out of the long chapter you've had in professional sport, and you've done that relatively recently as well, which is interesting. But with every guest, we always ask them, now that the boots are hung up and the rose-tinted specs are on, you look back with fondness, you forget all the pain and all the discomfort of pre-seasons, etc. If you had to pull out one or two memories that you can say, do you know, I'm really proud of that. When I look back over my career, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't want to suggest what they might be, but what comes to mind for you, Marcus? What would come to mind as one or two instances over your rugby career?
I'd say the one that's probably most obvious is if you were to look at my career would be the Rio and the silver medal, but specifically just walking over to my parents actually with the sort of medal after being on the podium, that moment in itself, rather than the games and everything else, which is obviously amazing and important.
Yes.
That kind of memory of passing over the medal to my parents in the crowd was something that will definitely stick with me. And
Love it.
then just something again reasonably well, again pretty personal, but in terms of I've never touch wood had any. I say touch wood, I'm not playing anymore. Any really bad injuries where I've required, lots of surgeries or anything, but
Yes.
I had like an ongoing Achilles tendonitis issue for, I don't know, eight years in my career. So pretty much the majority or at least half of it. So kind of getting over that, or there was a couple of periods sort of in training where I had a pretty tough time with it. So I just remember two games kind of warming up and thinking that I felt really good and I'd done everything sort of preparation wise and managed to get myself in a good spot. And I just really enjoyed those two moments quite a lot. And I
Right.
ended up kind of learning quite a lot about myself. So those two quite random moments, I'd say.
Yeah, no, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, forgive me for making the obvious suggestion, but most athletes, when you actually dig back into the backstory, have a very high level of gratitude to their family, somebody in their family who was the proverbial taxi driver, who was facilitating a lot of the early stages of development. And you're not the first. We had Tonya on recently talking about representing GB in diving and walking out in that tracksuit and seeing the emotion on her parents' face as she was lining up on the pool side. So I presume your brother was also a successful rugby player. So I imagine your mum and dad were pretty selfless and were quite a big influence on you both in the development of your career.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I think my mum knows, or now she does, I suppose, but before knew nothing about rugby. Didn't really like the sport much. Just kind of wanted her boys. There's three of us. My youngest played a little bit as well.
Right, right.
Um, um, and uh, and yeah, I think she just wanted us to basically get through the games without getting injured. So that was kind of her main concern. But a lot of driving around, and my dad's a big rugby fan. So I think for him, having his three boys sort of play rugby, it was something that I'm sure he never really pushed on us, but something that he's told us he's pretty proud of us for. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It's always nice. It's just lovely to see. My wife used to work around the Olympics, and she always said, meeting the families was always so special because they know the journey. They know, yeah, what you've alluded to there, the battles with injury, trying to stay on top of that Achilles tendonitis and all the things you go through, the discipline, the sacrifice. And then when you can stand there, silver medal in hand, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. So good for you. I've always got to be mindful as we start these interviews, Marcus. You can just drift off and spend the whole time talking about the sporting chapter because it's so interesting and you're no different. But if we bring it back to the sort of transition element then. It's relatively recently that you retired. Tell it, when did you retire? How old were you? And what was the rationale? Was it on your terms? You said you've not had major injuries. So what made you say, well, this is it now. I think it's time to move on.
Yeah, so I retired last year in I think July or June.
Right.
I was 33, 33. Yeah. So I fortunately had a long career actually. In the end, I think 15 or 16 years.
Fabulous.
Um, in my own terms, yes and no. Yes, because in theory, I kind of decided I didn't really want to play anymore. But a couple of reasons really behind that. Speaking sort of candidly, I don't think I would have got a sort of the top flight deal at a French club or Premiership would have been the preference, but with the squeeze of Wasps, London Irish,
Yes.
Worcester going, that didn't look like a genuine option. So potentially was speaking to my agent looking into France Pro D2. At that point, my second daughter was on the way. I really probably, at 33, I probably would have played for maybe another year or two. It just didn't really seem worth it to me,
Right.
to
Yeah.
be completely honest. So, um, yeah, I think where I was at in Benetton, I maybe would have stayed for one more season. So, but yeah, so
On
I
your
guess
terms
so.
in the main, it
Yeah,
makes perfect sense. I mean,
yeah,
the fact that you got that longevity in your career, good for you, because in the physicality of rugby, it's not a given by any stretch.
yeah.
But we see a lot of people wrestling with where they are, and even as you were exploring that answer there, you could see there's still that element of a wrestle because there's still a part of your brain going, yeah. I probably could have done one more year, but was that going to be right for my family? And that is absolutely a carbon copy sort of case study of what we see a lot with existing athletes.
Mm,
Whatever the discipline, I could probably do a bit more. Not sure I want to. So it's a classic sort of dance between do I step into the next chapter? Do I stay? Is my body up to it? Does my family want it? Etc. Etc.
yeah.
Hence the challenge of transition. So it's
Mhm.
not that long ago, Marcus, as you say,
Yeah.
it's just over a year really that you've actually retired. But give us a little bit of a flavour of what you've done since you hung up the boots then, since you came back from Benetton. What sort of roles have you been involved in and how does that bring you up to the present day?
Yeah, so I've been incredibly fortunate to be fair with the way I've kind of slotted into my role at work because it's in the family business, so it's kind of in procurement. I'm in the procurement branch of it, so that's kind of what
Right?
I'm doing at the minute. Um, and uh, and yeah, so kind of went straight into that. Had spoken to obviously the family probably a year before solidly, but I did think I was going to spend another year in Italy, so it was reasonably short in terms of really planning it, but it had been in the works for a while.
Right.
If I'm honest, I had that. I was incredibly fortunate that that was always been a backup option,
Yes.
which has probably helped me subconsciously throughout the way quite a lot.
Yes.
And then on the flip side, my mum always wanted me to get a degree. Managed to get one in my last year.
I saw that. Good for
Yeah,
you. First class honours as well in it.
yeah. So I was pretty happy about that. So I managed to get that in my last year playing, which timing wise was pretty ideal. And
Yep.
then just through some of the contacts I had, Paul Hodgson, if you remember him, the scrum half
Yes.
Irish,
Yes.
he's a it's funny when you kind of meet somebody when you're younger and then you spend time with them when you're now sort of older because I was in the academy at 17, 18, and there was some people maybe in that weren't the best role models, but he was and is exactly the same as he was when I was younger, and he kind of called me. He's from around the same area and called me and asked if I could help out with the school he's head of sport at, which is
Right.
Cram. Um, so doing a bit of coaching there, and a bit of
Nice.
coaching at Cobham Rugby as well, and some coaching bits and pieces here and there is another thing that I've done, and one more that I'm still kind of looking to explore as an ex teammate of mine, Will Fraser, has
Yes.
started a Yeah, actually, he was on the podcast too.
That's right. He's
Yeah,
an ambassador of ATA actually. Great
right,
guy.
right,
Yeah, he's one
right.
of the first guys we spoke to, and we're just very, very aligned from a values
Yeah,
and sort of vision perspective. So yeah, sorry to cut in, but yeah, he's a great guy.
no, he is, and he's kind of reached out to see if I wanted to do some speaking, kind of tell a bit of the Olympic story to some businesses and see how we can kind of align on that. And that is something I
Fabulous.
really do want to do. But I also have, which I think was a good thing, I've kind of thrown myself into everything and now trying to figure out exactly how to fit it all in still,
Yeah,
even a year down the line.
yeah.
So that's something I'm hopeful to do in the future.
I love it, and I'm scribbling as you're talking, just because there's so many bits you're touching on there, and it's again a really nice snapshot for us, Marcus, because there's themes that come through from all of our guests, and I make no apology sometimes for my repetition and drawing these themes
Mm,
out because it's not a given that every listener is going to listen to every episode. But if you have listened to every episode, you will be seeing the themes. But hopefully, then you're doing something with the themes and you are implementing them into your transitional plan. Because one of the things you've touched on here is being willing to try multiple things.
yeah,
Lots of people put undue pressure on themselves that they've got to find that absolute perfect fit, key in the door, step into this is me for life. But if you hadn't been a professional sportsman, most people in industry are very understanding that there might be chapters. You might do one role for a period of time, then something else, and eventually you settle on what you like. So
yeah,
it makes perfect sense to be able to say, let me try multiple things. You say, I'm trying to fit it all in.
yeah.
Something might fall away. But that
Mhm.
element of coaching, that element of being back in education and coaching within that space, the element of the family business, and also exploring that more entrepreneurial environment with Will and potential speaking, etc. That's fabulous because it gives you a really broad perspective on what you like to do.
Mhm.
And it'd be easy for someone to say, well, it's easy for Marcus, family business, he had something lined up.
Mhm.
Yes, to a point. And
Yeah.
you mentioned it. And if you hadn't, I was going to mention it that I admired the fact that even though you knew you had something there, you went and invested in yourself, pursued a degree, did the degree, and came out with the first class honours in the degree to give you yet more confidence and yet more options should you decide, hey, maybe the family business isn't right for me. So,
Yeah.
how have you found just staying connected from that coaching point of view help with that identity situation, Marcus? I'm not saying that you've had identity challenges, but a lot of people we speak to go, it's like a hard stop. At one
Yeah.
minute, I'm a professional sportsman, next minute, I'm out. And they
Yeah.
find that difficult. Now, obviously, I sense you're enjoying giving something back both to the pupils in the school and at the club. Has that helped you in this sort of transitional period?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, just something that you'd mentioned that I just wanted to
Yeah,
bring
of
back
course.
before is instead of actually, I can't really take too much credit actually for trying to do as much as possible. That is very much I go back to my family again, but my mum
Yes.
in particular, with the degree, for example, I didn't want to do that.
Right.
She constantly pushed me to do that.
Right.
And in the end, I obviously did it. And then exactly the same thing in terms of some of the coaching stuff. I didn't want to, this is kind of linked. I didn't want to do any coaching, to be honest. I didn't think that
Okay.
would be something I was into. And my mum kind of was just saying you should be trying to do as much as you can for now. Again, wasn't at the start, didn't really want to listen, then came round to the idea. So having those people in giving you good advice has been massively helpful for me. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, in terms of the identity situation, I find that the most interesting actually since I finished because I've never been somebody who thought I would find it too difficult to stop. I thought I would just kind of finish and that would be that. And granted, I haven't at all,
Okay.
but I think that's because I'm involved in it still. If I'd had that hard stop that you'd mentioned, I think then I would have kind of felt like, okay, what's going on? I still feel like I'm kind of involved in rugby to an extent,
Yes.
which is been very helpful for me actually because um, I think there's something about retiring where you kind of a little bit of me felt like I needed to park that whole chapter.
Yeah.
Uh, but actually, I think maybe it's a bit of giving back or something to do with it. Um, that I'm kind of like, well, there's actually a different one that still feels familiar. It's
Yeah,
quite
and
nice.
it's very personal, Marcus. Again, for people listening, we've talked to some people that say, I 100% needed to stop. I
Mm,
needed a break. Well,
mm,
we've talked to some people who have played at the international level, done everything, but didn't even watch the sport, their particular sport, just been for a year because it was too uncomfortable. So I
Yeah.
think it's been comfortable giving yourself permission to say, just because this teammate on my right did it this way, I have to do it that way. And just because this teammate on my left did it this way, I have to do it that way. It's
Yeah.
very, very personal. And
Mm.
we spoke with Conrad Smith a while back, and he talked about finishing up his career and experimenting with coaching. He did go
Mm.
into it, but then he realized, no disrespect to anybody in coaching, but it wasn't for him, and he
Yeah.
reversed out of that, and
Mm.
that's okay as well. You try
Yeah.
things and you step in, step out, and just going back to your mum as well. Good for her. And we always say, have people that can hold you to account. In that sporting environment,
Mm.
you'll have coaches, teammates, conditioners, etc., that can just sniff out the proverbial BS, hold you to account, and just call it as it is.
Yeah.
When you step out of sport, it's really important to find that. You might be blessed that it's your partner. You might not have a partner. It could be a family member, in your case, your mum. It could be an external coach or mentor, the sort of role that Carl and I are doing with people. But you need people that can call it as it is
Hmm.
and actually hold you to account. And when you say, I don't want to do something, explore that in a respectful way. Because
Yeah.
if everyone around you had said, yeah, man, don't do a degree, well, then you wouldn't have done it. And if everyone said,
Mm.
yeah, don't, you wouldn't have done it. And actually, with the benefit of hindsight, I think it's fair to say you're pleased that you did do the degree and you're pleased you did step into coaching, aren't you?
Yeah. Weirdly, with the degree, I'm pleased I did it because um, it's so I learned quite a lot, and it's completely different. I hadn't studied for however long, so
Yes.
I found it difficult and completely new. Uh,
Yes.
it's more of the feeling that I got when I'd finished and I'd done it all and I'd spent that invested that time that felt rewarding.
Yes.
But the actual degree itself is lovely to have as something that I might need at some point. Um, but I found it interesting that I kind of had this idea that I'd finish and I'd have a degree and I'd have to be able to I'd put that on a CV, and that would be really useful to have all the time. And quite frankly, I've not had to use that degree to at all so far. It's more been about contacts that I've had, or um, and being very lucky going into the family business.
Yes.
That
Yes.
those kind of two things as well.
And that's it. That's a classic. I mean, I've got two daughters, and my eldest daughter, we talk a lot. She's getting into that journey of education, and both my parents are retired teachers, so I do value education. But
mm,
caveat that before I say the next thing. But you're absolutely right. At certain points in your life, you get really intense pressure around maybe it's GCSEs, A levels, degrees. But fundamentally, how many times do people ask you, tell me, show me, give me your certificates and results?
yeah.
Without sounding disrespectful to education, that doesn't happen all that often.
Mm,
However, I think there's a sense of satisfaction, a development of confidence, and an inner belief and sort of steel that develops that you were able to do a degree. And from what I deduce, while still being a professional athlete with all of those commitments, whilst also having one child and another on the way.
mm,
So the proof to yourself that I can hold down my career as a professional athlete, still be a family man, support my wife, support my children, and find the time to study and come out with a top ranking degree. It's that's, I think, powerful for the future. In addition to the modules and the insight, I think it gives you an extra level of confidence to be able to do it against that backdrop. Is that a fair statement, Marcus?
you've absolutely hit the nail on the head for me. Like I think everything you'd said there was, yeah, the feeling of rewarding of reward from kind of all those things you mentioned was what I took from it rather than the actual degree itself,
Yes. Yeah.
which is just as worth it.
Which is a first statement. Now, a buzzword you mentioned a couple of minutes back there was network. So let's just touch
Mm,
on that, because one of the things that comes up a lot is how you develop your network. You've mentioned with former teammates coming back to the fore, contacting, reconnecting, opening up doors for you. So that's the classic networking opportunity.
yeah.
I'm gonna sort of wrap this into a question that we often say. So I'm not saying this has to be networking. If it's not networking, we'll come back to networking. But I always like to ask guests, if you look back with the benefit of hindsight and said, look, what's one thing I would say to everybody? Do this. And equally, with the benefit of hindsight, what's one thing I would say to listeners? Don't do that. With a view to making the transition easier, less stressful, less daunting, sometimes it's networking that comes up. It doesn't have to be. So I'm going to throw that question at you with the benefit of hindsight. What would you say? Do you know what? Yeah, this really helped. I would say do this. This probably, with the benefit of looking back, if I could go back in a machine, speak to Marcus while I was still playing, I'd say don't do that. What comes to mind for you on those questions, Marcus?
Yeah, for me, when I think of the word networking, I think of when I was 18, 19, and the RPA, the Rugby Players
Yes.
Association, they would hold some networking events for people. And it was kind of like I felt like I was 18, I was thrown in a room, I didn't even know who was going to be in the room. I ended up just talking to my mates. Wasn't really that interested because I was very single-sighted, which has
Yep.
benefited me in certain ways and not so much in others. Um, but now, for me, networking doesn't mean that at all. It's literally just speaking to people who you're interested in,
Yep.
or what they're doing that you might be interested in. It's more about curiosity than anything else.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think I've always had that curiosity, but I would say to me, when I was younger, be more curious and don't worry about asking so many questions. I think I was very wary about asking too many questions when I was younger,
Interesting.
and now I will almost apologize to people for asking too many questions
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the apology I kind of just use so that to try and make sure they're not too unhappy with me because I like asking questions and
Yeah.
I like hearing answers.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's well, just on that. I think it's a wise statement. I listened to a podcast host recently who's interviewed a few billionaires,
Mm,
and he said, "You know what? An interesting trait of the billionaires is they ask you as many questions as you ask them." And he said that theme of curiosity runs through that they're genuinely interested,
yeah.
and they almost flip the interview and they start. This particular host has invested in property and different things, so that they're quizzing him. So I
Mm,
think there's something in that, as you say. Never be frightened to ask questions. And another thing that comes to mind here, because a lot of people listen, go, "Oh, networking, I hate networking," and especially in Britain, it's very, "What do you do?" It's that question. It's a bit stale and it's a bit wooden. And
yeah.
I had a mentor when I was younger, and he advocated a question which seems a bit fluffy, but trust me, it was. What are you excited about currently?
Hmm.
And it just opens up a totally different dynamic in a conversation because someone
Yeah.
will tell you about a forthcoming holiday. Somebody else might tell you about the daughter getting married. Somebody else might tell you they're about to go and watch the Ryder Cup. Somebody
Yeah.
else is like, "Oh, I'm going to go and follow, go on a trip with some friends." It often moves away from work and they engage with you far more effectively. So it's just a little networking tip for anybody that's forced into these spaces. Oh, what do you say? Well, just try that. What are you excited about currently? And just see
Yeah.
where the conversation goes.
Completely sort of I don't know, this is probably irrelevant, but it's just come into my head completely when you're talking about excitement uh and people talking about something that they like. I
Yes,
remember watching when I was younger, there was a program called Extreme Fishing with Robson Green.
I remember that. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I have no interest in fishing in the slightest, but I watched that program just because of how enthusiastic he was about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So there is something about just finding out something that someone is enthusiastic about, and you learn
Draws
from.
you in.
Mm.
100% draws you in. Well, I know we're going off a tangent here, but extreme fishing took me into river monsters. I don't know if
Right.
that's just another
Yeah, yeah,
random
yeah.
way, just pull out the sort of prehistoric fish and what have you. So yeah, no, I can. Many people listening might be saying, "What are they talking about here? What's this got to do with transition?" But I can
Yeah.
relate to it. So
Mm.
so bring it back to the do's and don't thing question then,
Yeah.
Marcus. Does is it linking back into networking? I don't want to make that your answer,
No, no,
but
no,
is that
no.
something that you would say, "Oh, that was really important to try and help me," or is there another tip that you would share with people?
That's the main one, and as you said, it's probably come into my mind because we've spoken about networking.
Yes.
Um, but
What about on the don't side then? Is there anything that you look back with the benefit of hindsight and go, "Do you know what? I'd advocate people not to do that if they want to sort of make that transition out of sport easier."
it's kind of a bit easier said than done for me because the don't side, if I look at myself, for example, I'd be like, I'd easily tell myself, don't waste time because I had so much time when I was younger,
Yeah.
um, where, I'd come back from training and I'd sit there, watch TV the whole time or kind of play PlayStation or something. But at the same time, that has maybe taught me a lesson now that I have a lot more time than I think. Um, and yeah, hindsight's great, but I've kind of I think going through some of that and trial and error or whatever has maybe taught me quite a lot to what I know now. And I'd probably 5 years time, 10 years time, I'll be the exact same. But in terms of categoric don'ts, there would be an element of don't waste too much time. Um, and probably for me, what I do now in comparison to what I used to do was I will I'm a lot more organized. I was not organized at all before. Um, so if I'm looking at myself personally, I would say that's something I wish I'd done a little bit earlier because that just would have benefited me from an earlier age. It's
Yeah.
just organization.
And it's great, and I can see you sort of wrestling with it as you said it. Well, maybe that, and so I think this is the interesting thing with hindsight. I sound like I'm going to contradict myself here. I think life happens in a way for us so that we learn.
Yeah,
We shouldn't have regrets. Everything we've done, everything we've experienced brings us to this point. That being said, where it sounds like a contradiction, there are other people still walking the path
yeah,
behind us. So the benefit of hindsight is as much for them as it is for us and how we evolve and shape ourselves. So to drop on that key point, I think it is so important because many athletes will say, "Oh, I don't have time. I need to focus in on my weights, my analytics, my flexibility, my skill development." And there's a million things you can do to become a better athlete. 100% has to be the priority. But when we're brutally honest with ourselves, even when all that is done, there is a lot of time left. And you
yeah,
mentioned it, and we've all been there. I've been there. You can drift towards a coffee shop. You can drift towards, Netflix. You can drift towards the Xbox or the PlayStation, and all of that is fine. We're not saying don't do stuff that relaxes you and enjoys you, but just being aware, I have time.
yeah.
I have time, and if I chip away at something, the transition will be easier. There was a statistic came up recently, and I love to read, and I shared this with my daughters as well. And it was words to the effect of, if you invest an hour a day in something, in
Mm,
5 years' time, you can legitimately expect to be world class.
yeah.
Now, if you're in your 40s, someone might go, "Well, yeah, fine." But when you're in your teens and your 20s, 5 years is nothing. And if someone
Hmm.
says, "Wow, you could be what," and I was saying this to my daughter, imagine you picked up an instrument now, did it an hour a day, in 5 years' time, before you're out of your teens, you could be world class if you want.
Yeah.
So it's about the willingness to find that time. And so, to your point, it's really important we jump on that, Marcus, because you look back now with that benefit of hindsight. Say, I did have time. I did
Mm.
have to. Didn't always necessarily use it, but I did have time. It would have probably been far easier. Is this a fair assessment to have done your degree before the kids came along, before you'd met your partner, when you were just sitting there, sort of gaming on the PlayStation? Is that a fair conclusion?
It's a fair conclusion that it would have been easier. But I actually don't think I would have done it.
Really
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So it's definitely would have been easier, but I don't think I would have completed it if I'd because I had tried before, and I say I tried. I if I'd really tried, I would have finished it. So I wasn't fully invested.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And that's it. These what we're doing here is we're giving sort of levers and pressure points for people to listen and go, "Well, I could, I might," and they hear this
Yeah.
a lot. And it's no surprise for anyone that's listened to a lot of the episode. Develop your network and use your time wisely are two of the
Mm.
messages that come through time and time again. So we're reiterating them, but we're getting that from different sectors, different individuals, male, female, different sporting disciplines. So there's something in it. It's
Yeah.
pretty much the sort of in the top two or three responses that most people give.
Mm.
Now, you're doing a few different things now, Marcus. Another question that we often ask about is just that reflection on transferable skills, because it's easy for a lot of existing athletes to get down on themselves and say, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just a professional hockey player, or I'm just a soccer player, I'm just a rugby player, this is what I do. It's all I know." And they narrow down their sort of field of focus and lose sight of the fact there's a lot of things that they already do
Yeah.
that, with a bit of guidance and a bit of support, can transfer superbly well into business. So now you've got multiple hats on. You're looking at the speaking opportunities, you're into the schools, you're into the sort of coaching as well, and you're working in that family business in that procurement space. What sort of things do you think actually, yeah, there probably certain things were already in me, but what things have been sharpened and developed as Marcus, the rugby player, that are now helping support you in this next chapter?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes up, which I'm sure you've heard a million times before, is around kind of resilience and there's been some times where I've started the work and I've thought straight away in terms of time that I've used to have. I could have been like I could have started learning a little bit about this ages ago because I don't know what I'm doing. Um, and I think it's one of them where if I hadn't played sport, I'd probably be quite down about that and think this is going to take ages for me to learn.
Yeah.
But I kind of had a bit of a calming thought about it by being like, you kind of break it down and just think in 6 months' time I'm going to be better. In a year's time I'll be even better. And then you get to a point where you feel comfortable and you kind of know what that comfort feels like, and you almost look forward to that instead of thinking at the time this is stressful.
Yeah.
I can almost flip that stress into thinking, okay, stress is it might be a good thing for me for now, and then in 6 months' time, as long as I put that work in, I'll benefit from it.
Yeah.
Um,
I like
and
that. I like because I think athletes work in chunks, don't they? It's like,
yeah,
well, this is the amount of time I spend in pre-season. This is the season. This is the chunk of time for the season. This is the off season. And I think we're quite adept at saying, right, well, if I commit to a pre-season, I expect to improve. I expect to develop, get stronger, get fitter, more flexible. And that does translate. You're absolutely
yeah,
right to take an objective and be able to break it down. I
mhm,
think athletes are good at that. They're good at being able to say, that's where I want to be. How do I get there?
yeah,
Just on the resilience point, I'm curious to go back to the statement you made right at the start of the discussion, Marcus, where you didn't really have any major injuries to contend with, which is
yeah,
great. It's always
mm,
nice to hear. But equally, then you talked about your Achilles needing managing for the better part of probably 8 years or so. So that in itself takes a high level of resilience. And I'd also suggest a lot of discipline. So presumably that was just a part of who you were, what you did. You were constantly having to manage that situation. And is that a first statement that it required quite a lot of thought and discipline in terms of how you were staying on top of that?
if there's one thing that I think I learnt, um, the strongest thing I think I've learnt from my career is around that actually, is the discipline side of things.
Right.
Word that gets thrown around so much.
Yes.
Mm. I kind of almost got to the point with my Achilles stuff where I would see it as there wouldn't even be motivation involved in it. It was like me taking my vitamins in the morning.
Yeah.
I'd have to be on the Smith machine. I'd have a routine that I have to do. Um, and I got a little bit obsessive about it at certain points by the fact that I ended up doing too much. At the start, I did too little, then I went overboard and did too much. But I very much learned that the discipline was by far the most important because there'd be, it might be a little bit to do with my personality, but there'd be certain times where I'd have a bit of anxiety about going on holiday, thinking, what can I do to make sure I can do my Achilles rehab,
Yeah.
which is crazy thinking about it. But there is some positives to that because you end up kind of adapting, traveling around with a makeshift uh, strap and wooden block so I could kind of do some of my Achilles stuff.
Right.
And then we go back to opening up discussions. I read dissertations on Achilles, or bits of dissertations, not whole dissertations, on Achilles injuries and tendonitis, and I reached out to a guy called Alex Natera, who's meant to be the tendon specialist in terms of some rehab stuff, and he lives in Australia, and I kind of sent him an Instagram, sent someone else a message um, who's high up in blood flow restriction. So I think that opened up a whole door in terms of discipline and trying to figure out solutions that was really really important for me, and maybe why I mentioned, well, not maybe, it's definitely why I mentioned it in terms of the memories from
Yes. Yeah,
with
the pride. So
yeah.
again, it's funny that that one analogy there, it's tied a lot of things together. So we talked about networking, and a lot of people are uncomfortable doing it. You were networking there. You were
Mm.
reaching out to esteemed professionals in that space. Why? Because it was important to you. So the
Mhm.
message I would draw out of that is it becomes a lot easier to be curious and to ask questions if it's aligned with something you are genuinely
Yeah.
interested in. So being able to sort of reflect and say, where would I like to be? Now, I know in this instance it was about injury management, but it's important to you. But that principle translates. If you have a desire to get into coaching, or you have a desire to get into property, or you have a desire to get into education, well, who would be good people to speak to? And it's much easier to be curious about something you're interested in. So I think that was powerful.
Yeah.
I think the discipline side, you talked about that sense of achievement of finishing your degree because it took discipline.
Yeah.
Your pride, when we mentioned the Rio, totally understandable, but basically proud of the fact you stayed on top of your Achilles. Without discipline, possibly your career would have ended a lot earlier, Marcus. Possibly that Achilles would have stopped you earlier. Is that potentially that could have been the case?
Yeah, I thought about it after Wasps actually.
Right.
I thought about it then, and then what was really nice was it was at a really bad point towards the end of my Wasps career, and it had been for a long period, and then went to Italy and actually kind of rejuvenated itself, and it was really good for the 2 seasons I was there on the whole.
Fabulous.
So that was also a really nice feeling too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that discipline is a really powerful transferable skill. So
Mm.
there'll be people listening that relate to this, Marcus. Go, well, I've done that. I've been really disciplined on my injury rehab. And like you say, it's not about motivation. It just became a part of who you were. I'm
Yeah,
always thinking about how I can do this. Well, that's what drives high performance in industry as well as sport. It's having the discipline to do the component parts consistently well.
yeah,
Nobody's got a magic silver bullet. Do this or take this magic pill, and you are an elite performer in industry. The same principle applies. Be
yeah,
disciplined. Do the
mm,
little things consistently well.
yeah,
And anybody who's rehabbed back or managed an injury as you have has already sort of hardwired in the insight to, well, when I'm disciplined, I get a result. So I
yeah,
think that's another really good transferable skill, Marcus. I love that. I love that. So just wrapping up a sort of a couple of quick fire questions that we've started to throw in. Now, what's
yeah,
nice as the ATA communities grow, Marcus, is people ping in questions and oh, you should have asked this, you should have asked that. So
yeah,
we started like going back to people and say, well, if there's some questions, some quick fire, what do you like? And there was, again, as I keep using in this episode, themes, things
yeah.
that people ask about. So the first one that is really very much requested is, okay, distill it down into one piece of advice. If you could pass on one piece of advice, might be your own, might be something you were given, Marcus, might be sport related, indeed it might be life related, it doesn't matter. But if there was one piece of advice you'd say, I'd share that impacted me and I'd share that to the listeners, what would that be?
Work on the things that you're actually good at rather than I think a lot of the time people get told to work on things that they're not necessarily
Right.
rugby context, right? Someone says to me, your tackling's not great. I need you to work on your tackling more. So then, but then why I was picked in the team might have been because of my speed and footwork.
Yes.
Completely neglect that, I then become an average player instead of what maybe makes me stand out. So I think something that I try and tell um, some of the kids that I coach, especially, is that to make sure they spend enough time or more time working on what they enjoy and what they're actually good at, because they'll probably get better results from it and they'll keep enjoying what they're doing.
Like it. Yeah, that's great advice. Now, that's just jogged my memory. Before we went live recording, Marcus, you were talking about seeing somebody getting injured and
Mm,
and then prompting you to seek advice for dealing with injury from some of your former colleagues. And
yeah.
you expected a sort of standard set of responses, and you got quite a diverse set of responses. So, in light of the fact that we've just been talking about your Achilles management, etc., and me saying there'll be people who are wrestling with injury rehab all the time, do you
Mm.
want to just share was a couple of bits of that advice that you thought, oh, that was quite interesting in terms of managing that process and dealing with that setback of injury?
Yeah, I think I found it really interesting that all I think 10 people that I reached out to had pretty different things to say. It kind of went around the theme of um, one about the discipline,
Yeah,
to make sure you kind of get back, and then a lot of people saying explore other things that maybe you haven't had time to do before, um, and also celebrating the little wins that you get in your rehab process because it's quite easy, especially when you're young, to just look at yourself in terms of I've got a boot on, how am I going to be playing again?
hmm
Instead of I've got a boot on, I've got a boot off.
yeah,
That is actually a bit of a win there, even though for that stage you might have not done much, but it means you can now. So it's about enjoying those little wins is something that people said that kind of resonated with me.
yeah, yeah, like it.
And then some rugby related ones. Someone mentioned even though you're injured, you can still become a better rugby player, reviews, etc. If it's a leg that you've injured, you can still work on upper body strength, all that kind of thing,
Yeah,
having a bit of a different focus. Um, I'm trying to think if there was anything else. And then there was some other strange ones being like, you'll be amazed at how, your body can heal it. Your body can heal even if you've had serious injuries, that kind of thing.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Mindset's so powerful. I mean, I know we've segued out of the sort of best piece of advice, and you gave a great piece of advice about work on your strengths. But I think that reference to your mindset driving performance is so important. And not everybody listening is a contact sport athlete playing rugby or what have you, but everybody struggles in. Sometimes it's your hamstring. Sometimes, as you say, Achilles. It could be something that happens doing plyometrics, being in the gym, whatever.
mm,
We've both seen people who really step into that positive mindset immediately. I can remember someone who, ironically, had a serious Achilles injury straight into the boot, and in no time at all, they were working on their upper body, and they were telling everybody, "My upper body's not right. I hate it. The soreness, the thing, it impacts my ability to play. Well, I'm not playing right now, so I can have a mini preseason and just get straight into that." And equally, they were enrolled in an academic course. So I remember that really within 2 weeks, they were intensively training their upper body and they're on a course. And I was like, wow, that's an example of how to do it
yeah,
versus you could have sat at home feeling sorry for yourself, not eating the right things or drinking the right things and just being like, well, I'm out now for months in a boot. So why and what does it matter? So no, I think that's that you just segued into that perfectly, Marcus. Bringing it back to the quick fire round. A lot of people love podcasts. A lot of people still love to read the books. We've had
yeah.
some really interesting answers to this, but is there a particular book that you've read along the way, Marcus, that you're like, wow, that had an impact on me that you would recommend as something to read?
Um, the first book I probably read that shifted my mindset a bit, and it
Yeah,
was recommended by my sports psychologist at England Sevens, Katie Warriner, um, now Katie Mobed actually, who is incredible. Um, and it's called the Chimp Paradox.
yep,
I It kind of just flipped a bit of my thinking. That was kind of the first book that made me think, okay, I can read a little bit more into these kind of things.
yep, yeah, love
I'd
it.
recommend, yeah, I'd recommend that one. And Atomic Habits, I like.
James
Uh,
Clear, yeah, yeah,
and then not so much learning, but oh, what was the one called now that I really enjoyed? Oh, I can't remember what it was called. But I'm reading some of the ancient Greece stuff now, which I'm enjoying as well. Bit
love
different.
it. Love it. And again, I mean, again, both of those, Steve Peters, Chimpat is behind me here. I think it's really
Right.
interesting to hear what resonates with everybody. And there are
Yeah.
again, there pops that one pops up a lot. But again, when you've got a bit of time, whether you're injured or not, detach from what you're doing. I've always
Yeah.
felt reading is a great way to detach. If you don't like reading, you maybe want to listen to it as an audio book, or you might want to listen on a podcast. But just that sense of achievement of learning something and detaching from the pressures of your day-to-day elite environment's important. So no, I like that. Now this one, I always sort of stumble over this, make an apology for it, so I should just stop doing it. But it's in essence, it's your most treasured possession. The way it was originally positioned by a few people was the house is burning down, the family's safe, but if you could grab one thing, what is it? And I've sort of reframed that a bit into your most treasured possession. What comes to mind for that one, Marcus?
Jeez. Now I'm going to think of something later that I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's fine. Well, we can
said that.
circle back. We can put a note in the show notes if it doesn't come
Yeah.
to mind. But go on, I sound like a quiz show host. I'm going to press you and just say what comes to mind right now. You can always upgrade it down the track.
Weirdly, and I don't actually, I'm sure there would be a different answer, but I would just say the first thing that came to my head was my uh, wedding album,
Love it.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, I honestly would not have told you that would have been the first thing that came to my head, but it was just, plenty of pictures of all your friends in one place.
exactly. And your wife's going to love that. You get brownie points if she's
Yeah.
listening as well. So yeah, no, it's a great one. Now, next one is that classic one. You'll have heard this before, but it still always piques curiosity. You're hosting a dinner. You can invite three people, dead or alive, to make it a good night, an interesting night. And who's it going to be? Who's coming to dinner, having a couple of drinks with you?
I love this question. I have a different answer each time, but I always have Mike Tyson in there because
Nice.
I don't know why I find him so interesting. Um, I'd have Ricky Gervais for some comedy,
Yeah.
and um, who's the other one I'd have? The other one I'd have that I'd really want to speak to, and I forget his name. I'd have to find it out, but there was I can't remember in one of the Olympics there was the 200-meter athletes, I think it was, that did the Black Power sign.
Right. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there was the Australian white guy who did the Black Power sign as well. And I'd like to have him there because,
Yes.
um, yeah, I just think that he hasn't. there's not too much there out about him, and he had a pretty rough time, I think, when he went back to Australia, and he stood up for a good cause on his own.
Fabulous. What a great, what a wonderful answer. And that's why that's such a great question, isn't it? You hear it, but people have very different perspectives of what they want and why they want it. And that would be a very intriguing conversation to have. So
Mm,
I love that. I love that. Now, last question.
yeah.
If you were going to recommend somebody from your network, Marcus, somebody you know that we should approach potentially as a guest to come on, talk a little bit about their story of transition, is there anybody in your mind that you say, that might be? I know you mentioned Tommy Taylor, one of our recent guests, good
Yeah.
friend of yours already, but is there anybody that you think would be worth us extending an invitation to?
Yeah, the way my mind's working, I'm literally going through my team. So
Yeah.
if I go to London Irish, I would say um, Matt Garvey and Jonathan Joseph would be good ones.
Yeah.
Uh, and then if I then go to Newcastle, Mickey Young. Um, at Wasps, I would say Rob Miller.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, Benetton's a bit of a tricky one. England Sevens, I'd say Richard de Carpentier.
Perfect. Well, that's a great suite of names for us to look into there. So, again, your perspective very much valued in terms of who brings something to this because we want it to be interesting, we want it to be dynamic, and certainly in that, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Marcus. You've given really interesting insights. I hope people listening to this have found it really helpful. If people want to reach out and connect with you, I know you're on LinkedIn. Is that possibly the best channel to find you if they want to reach out, follow up, explore, future collaboration, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. That would probably be the best place now that the old Instagram and Twitter aren't being used too much these days. So
Yeah,
yeah,
more professional
absolutely.
now. It's the
Yeah,
next chapter of business. You're into that LinkedIn space. So we'll definitely put the links into the show notes so people can reach
good.
out. So as I started with a thank you, I'll finish with a thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
No, thanks very much, James. I really enjoyed that chat for sure.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insights, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.